Welcome. Hi, Francine.
Hi, sorry, I was on mute.
So the time is 5:04. We've got a full house. Why don't we go ahead and get started with a roll call attendance. Susan?
Susan Franklin, present.
Francine?
Francine Lyons, present.
Ralph?
Ralph Dormitzer, present.
Mike?
Mike Dick, present.
And Brian Host, present. So we have an incredibly comprehensive agenda for this evening, which was, I think, really set forth so that we could cover any item on it, including the items that we expect to pass through and those that we don't. But first, let me give a quick update with regards to the first 5 items on here. So there was and Michelle, please correct me if I get any of this wrong, but there was a select board meeting last night. And it's my understanding that each of those items, town hall, fields and courts, the roads and sidewalks, and the school feasibility study were all deferred to a later town meeting date, most likely a special town meeting in the fall. Is that accurate, Michelle?
That is correct.
Okay, so we do not need to spend any time on those this evening. We can focus all of our energies on trying to resolve the capital budget. It's the in-levy capital budget for the single warrant article on capital items this evening. So hopefully that makes things a little simpler. I guess what I'd like to suggest is that we pick up right where we left off last week, which was, with a $246,000 funding gap, and just give you a couple of updates. First of all, the spreadsheet we're working off of has a $420,000 number in the in the assumptions for the data center. But the actual revised request from Ron is actually $433,666. So it's an extra $13,666 that goes on top of that 246. So we're actually at about 250, 259 over in terms of cuts that we would need to make in order to stay within the appropriation. There were 3 items that we talked about last week, and I had a conversation with Nick Berardi on 2 of them. The first being the facilities vehicle request. So the long and the short of it is he's okay waiting as long as he can get an additional police cruiser that comes out of fleet when we buy the 2 new this year. And if possible, he'd like to actually get 2 of those and completely retire the Tahoe the police Tahoe that he has right now, because he said it's pretty tired. If he can get a slightly better Ford out of the fleet when we buy our 2 new, that would be his preference. So it would be a net addition of 1 to his fleet, which is identical to what would be taking place if we were buying a new vehicle. And that would also allow them to stop using the town's electric vehicle, which apparently was oversubscribed. The fleet of electric vehicles, which apparently there was lots of demand for that last summer. Facilities was using one and it wasn't available when other people wanted to use it. So he's okay waiting as long as he can actually get another, at least, a net addition of 1 retired vehicle. So that's that. With regards to the Deer Hill school tiles, I talked to him about the $60,000 number here, which is really 1/5 of a $300,000 project. And I asked him 2 questions. Number one, are we creating more work by breaking this up into 5 pieces and fundamentally having to manage 5 smaller projects versus just one large one? And the answer to that question was absolutely yes. I mean, for him to do a tile project, he has to order the tile and, you know, schedule the people that actually come in and do the tile replacement and oversee it. And it's the same amount of logistical, you know, sort of setup for him, you know, to do one classroom versus all of the classrooms. So, you know, we're actually creating work by breaking it up into 5 tranches. That was number one. The second thing is I asked him, you know, based on the money that we spent in the 2 prior years, if we've addressed, you know, all of the imminent sort of safety concerns about tiles that were actually sort of you know, curling, for lack of better purposes, and creating sort of catch hazard. And the answer to that question is yes. At this point, what's left is we almost every room has some cracked tiles in it, but the cracks are not huge and they don't present a danger. You know, at some point we need to do this, and we're not going to get the benefit of you know, the operating budget savings of not having to, you know, pull all the furniture out of those rooms, strip the floors, re-wax them, rebuff them, you know, until it's all done, which is part of the driver of this project. But in terms of, you know, in terms of immediate safety issue or immediate necessity to do tiles, the answer is no. These can wait. So I'd just like to share that, you know, at least from an operational and a cost saving, an implementation perspective and a cost saving perspective, it feels to me like it makes sense to do this all in one shot as opposed to, you know, spreading this over 5 years. And I guess I'll pause there for a second and see if people have any thoughts on that. I'd be happy to, you know, just poll quickly. You know, Ralph, any thoughts on anything I just said?
Just give me the total number again, Brian. What was the total for the entire 5-year plan?
It's roughly 300,000.
Is there any advantage? In other words, we're not getting any advantage price-wise because it's 5 times 60, right?
Correct.
Isn't there some advantage in actually doing this in 1 year and therefore getting 20% less or something? Is there some advantage here or not?
I don't think it translates necessarily into a cost advantage, although it could. I didn't really discuss that with him. I was really just more asking from a logistical perspective, are we creating 5 projects out of 1?
Okay. Well, the only other thing I would say is that 300,000, we're going to look at that next year or the year after, whenever we do it. We're going to say, gee, that we don't have 300,000. What are we not going to do? For example, maybe we don't do any more of the touch panels for the schools. I mean, it's going to come down to maybe the 300,000 we don't have to kick into the roads and so on becomes the 300,000 you throw at this project. But I don't know in the future years whether we'll ever find 300,000 for that one project all at once. And that'll be the issue for me. So never getting it done, in other words, at all as a result of delaying it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Look, it's not my preference to delay. I'm just trying to fit our priorities within the dollars we have to spend this year. Before we visit the conversation about dipping into the stabilization fund, which we can have, but that's the alternative. So that's as I look at this list, and well, I'm just talking about the 3 that we talked about last week. We sort of earmarked as potential deferrals, right? Those are the 2 from facilities, and look, both of them are going to need to get done, right? It's just those that have the ability to feel as though they have the best ability to be deferred without without headaches. And then the emergency response study at 75,000 is the 3rd item. And I think, Ralph, you made a case for not investing in feasibility studies until we actually know what we want to study. which certainly resounded with me last week, and I would still leave this one earmarked, but and I think there's there's an openness on behalf of the town manager's office to have this one excluded as well. But I'll stop there and see how other people feel about it.
I think when Chris, yeah, I'm sorry, this is Francine. I think,
Francine, sorry.
yeah, when Chris Senior said that, he didn't seem so, seem so adamant about funding the feasibility study. I mean, to me, that right there says it should be deferred if we do it at all out of the capital budget.
Okay. Susan?
Well, I guess I feel like by naming it new facility assessment, you're assuming it's going to be for a new building. And I think Ralph made some points about whether it ought to be assessing our building condition that we have today and what we can do in our current site. Which goes back to what you're saying, Brian. Before we can actually look at the building itself, we have to think about what it is we're trying to achieve. And I don't think we need a third party to help us come to that conclusion. We could go on tours of a bunch of police stations and fire stations and see what they're like.
Okay. Michael, any thoughts?
I agree with what's been said, and I had a conversation earlier today with Brian about this, and came to the conclusion with Brian that we ought to be going back to the chiefs in the spirit of, let's find out what they really want and need and ask them to articulate their needs. And then we can apply, what we feel we could support. I'll just throw in this little soapbox statement that following my tour of the public safety building and discussion with both Chief Dockery and Chief Quigley, it seemed to me that a possible solution lay in expanding the fire department's use of that building and finding other space for the police department, which we've started to go down that road somewhat. So just to tie up all of these thoughts, I agree that we should defer this assessment until the town, and that's a big catch-all, the town articulates its needs. I also feel that this could be an exercise that our committee can undertake in partnership with both chiefs, perhaps over the summer. We can do our own deep dive with them and talk about all the different options, and begin to develop a needs statement and start to look at possible solutions. And I love the idea of going to look at other facilities, particularly those that have been renovated or possibly repurposed rather than new build.
Okay, so it feels like there's feels like there's consensus around this one as well in terms of the deferral.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back.
Sorry,
go ahead. I want to go back to the retiling.
Yep.
I really feel we should be stressing maintenance, and we should allocate funds for that retiling in an effort to get maintenance pushed up our priority list. And I absolutely agree with Ralph that if this goes to 300,000, we're continually going to have to push it down the list. So I don't have an answer right now, but my preference is to keep the retiling in some fashion, so that we are maintaining our buildings, and capital budget is taking an active role in seeing to it that the maintenance is done, that we're setting priority for maintenance versus expansion. So if expansion is new ViewSonic screens, in my mind, that falls behind retiling, believe it or not, because I feel so strongly about maintaining the buildings. So that's my view.
So perhaps just one observation. We have moved plenty of school projects, greater than $300,000 through the capital budget annual process in past years. So certainly there's always tension in terms of when you do what, right? But we've already spent more than $300,000 on tiles up at Deer Hill School between the hallways, which had a subfloor issue, and then another wing last year. So I think we're $350,000 or $400,000 into this project. The reason that we still have $300,000 outstanding is because the price of tiles basically tripled from the time that we did the first two waves to the time that we did the first wave versus last year's wave. Where this would already be done and behind us for the dollars that we basically spent last year. So I guess what I'd say is, when this becomes a true imminent need, there's the ability to move it up and make it happen. And, something else that, is not as pressing will get pushed off, just as this is being discussed today. I do believe we have the ability to do $300,000 projects in the future. I guess is what I'm saying. We have and we will, just as we're doing a $400,000 data center, right now.
Well, and if roads gets moved out of our purview, then into its own stabilization fund, we'll have $300,000 right there.
If roads gets moved out, or alternatively, if a school maintenance fund gets set up, just as roads is getting set up, this would get done out of that.
Right.
It's the idea is not to dump it all into the new funds. The idea is to get incremental funding, but or alternatively, people ultimately hear the call that capital needs to be spending more than 1,996 a year, and the larger appropriation gets consensus and support in the annual budgeting process, which it did not this year. But I think people are increasingly starting to understand that this is not working.
Okay. So shall we leave it at 0 for now?
I guess I would ask the question, if we're not going to leave it at 0, what are we going to, if we add it back in at 60, recognize it's going to be there for the next 4 years, right? Number one. And number two, what $60,000 item are we going to take off of this list, recognizing that we're already still not at break even. There's more that needs to be cut than just these 3 items, is where I'm going.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like we're not done. These are just the 3 items that we discussed last week in terms of what can come out of here.
Right. We also talked about the IT spend.
Yeah.
First, starting with the iPads, and whether those iPads are all of the same age, and if so, do they all need to be replaced, or if there are some that are truly end of life and others that are not. And I looked through all my emails. I didn't see anything from Ron that or from schools that addressed that question. And then we also have the question of the smart panels and vendor risk.
Yeah, so Ron sent information. I'm trying to figure out where it went. Did anyone else see the,
I didn't see it. No. I
no
didn't.
one else saw the iPad email at all?
I
Well,
did. Let me see if I can pull it up.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Sure. Or just send it to the group. Hang on.
It might be helpful if you just pull it up, Michelle. So we're not all,
Do you want me to stop sharing screen and Michelle can share?
yeah, that would be good. We could pull this back up when we get to it.
Mhm. March 29.
Yeah, that's a different animal.
All right, this is.
When did this come through?
This key sent today. Let me see if I can find anything else. Hang on a sec.
Okay.
I definitely saw this.
Mhm. Let me check another place.
That one came through at 12:54 today.
Yeah.
Well, that I saw anything about iPads.
I definitely did, and I don't know where I saw it. I thought it was,
Oh, here it is. I have it. Here we go. I think that's it.
Michelle, I don't know if there's any way you can pull it over towards the to the left a little bit, but the video thumbnails are covering part of it.
Does that help at all?
No, I'm just going to hide the thumbnails and try not to make any funny faces, but and hopefully I can pull this back up. I've never tried this before.
Yeah, I don't know how to,
You can move your screen, you can move the video screen around on your screen so that you
Oh,
can
cool.
find the best position to see the document.
There we go. Okay.
I don't think this answers our question. It doesn't answer the question of how many must be replaced versus how many could be replaced. And Michelle, let me just point out that we just purchased a 9th generation iPad from Best Buy. They dropped the price from $329 each down to $269.
Wow.
yeah, so, right, that's always different than a municipality buying something.
Yeah.
Which makes it really challenging. I completely understand that.
So with the price drop in the retail market, I wonder if Apple has gotten to the point where they're trying to move these 9th generation iPads out of their inventory and perhaps get another price drop from Apple.
I'll be right back.
So Michael, the quote that we received from the school a while back through the Apple Education Program,
Yeah.
these are priced at $294 to $299.
Okay.
And I think what is making the price, much higher is there's a licensing of 6,800, charging station of 3,900, and gumdrop cases about 8,800. So the iPads themselves are 74 without the license and all that. I'm not sure what the license.
Oh, you're saying it's 290 something all in with licensing and
No, that's the iPad itself. This is an MDM license, which I'm not familiar with.
yeah. No, I'm not
Online,
suggesting,
it says it's something to do with being able to work on the iPad remotely, like not for the user, but for a techie person to go in
Mhm,
and work on it through the cloud if it's not
Yep.
behaving, I guess.
right.
Um,
What I'm thinking is, for 216 iPads, even if we get another $20, that's $4,000. So what I'm asking is, can we go back and see what kind of price we can get now?
So just a thought. I mean, the answer is yes, we can and should do that if we think there's a price break to be gotten. But we're like also in the final throes of trying to lock down this warrant. I don't think $4,000 is going to change sort of how we're approaching this.
Okay,
In terms of the warrant, in terms of the purchase, heck yeah, we chase the dollars.
okay.
And it's worth, and if someone can make a phone call, that's fine. I kind of suspect we're not going to get this entirely done tonight. But Michelle, can you put that back up? I was still looking at it. I apologize. Maybe a little bit slow here. Okay, so the two questions for last week were, number one, are we, can we buy a cheaper iPad versus a more expensive one? These are, so I did double check this, at least as far as I could tell, this is the lowest cost iPad that is commercially available at this time.
Mhm.
So they're not, they're not going fancy on this. And the charging bays and the are what they are. They're not big bucks. The covers at $35 each didn't strike me as, completely out of whack. It's not a cheap cover. It's not the most expensive cover either. So I'm just looking at the numbers here. So the proposal is for 253, which is 216. I'm just trying to tally the math and see if we're actually replacing the earlier ones.
Yeah, I see that you've scrolled down and where I said before our question wasn't answered, it actually is. I see it here.
Okay, so 180, so 240 of them are pretty darn old.
mhm.
Is that?
So we see 60 pre-2015 targeted replacement.
Yep.
We see 12 2017-18 time frame. That's 72. We scroll up. Summer 2016. That's 180.
Yeah.
So that's 252 now.
So there's your 252 that they're going
Yeah.
after.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So they've answered the question. They
Okay.
are in need.
Okay, there's your 252. I mean,
Okay.
we could have a debate about the 2017, 2018 and pushing that off for another year, but I mean, it's 12 iPads. It doesn't change the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. So we were looking
So-
for a bigger break, a bigger help. We're looking for more lift. And
Yeah. So does that answer everybody's questions on the iPads?
Mhm.
Okay. Susan, Ralph,
Yes.
thanks.
I'm very clear on them. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that's resolved. Which leaves us with the interactive smart panels. I don't think we've actually gotten a response on this. And I haven't done any independent work. I don't know, Ralph, if you've done any further independent work just to get comfortable that the panels are third party. I mean, I'm sure they are. We just don't know who, but
Yeah, they were originally, the panels themselves were Lucky Gold Star, but they got out of the business about a year and a half ago. So I don't know who ViewSonic is using, but they obviously don't make the smart panels. They simply use them. So,
right.
but so I don't know who they use now. I was not able to find that. I didn't try as hard as I should, but I wasn't able to find it. So.
So I guess the question I would have is, given that the hardware is not, not absolutely wed to, well, it's not ViewSonic proprietary. Let's put it that way. Does that give you more comfort, Ralph, that, if anything happened in Taiwan, that, they could just move to a different panel manufacturer? I mean, I assume that there are copies of the source code.
Yeah, I suppose. I really don't know. There's an oddity about the ViewSonic which surprised me. It has an embedded PC.
Yeah.
A very odd thing to have, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not sure why they do that, but that does limit what you can do unless you can just plug a PC in. I think there's some talk about you can plug a PC in if that becomes obsolete or fails.
It did say that.
Yeah, I thought so. What I see out of this is it is the most expensive one you can buy on the market, and there are probably 4 or 5 vendors out there. And I have no judgment about why this one was chosen, which is a good $1,000 higher than its nearest competitor. And although it might have some specific apps, I think, which make it attractive for classrooms, the question always was, as you have raised, whether or not those apps are absolutely portable and or can be acquired separately and run on any PC, because I think they're simply running on a PC, which is embedded in the current ViewSonic proposal. That's how it works. But I mean, these are a lot of very technical questions, and what makes it almost impossible to resolve this is the woman who is making the comparisons and the judgment has left the schools. So there's no one to really ask. And I certainly have not spent enough time to sort it all out. But if I were, I would spend an awful lot of time saying, what are the options? Where are the apps run? Can they be acquired separately? Are they unique? I mean, there's a whole slew of questions here. And because they're proposing the most expensive one that you can see on the net by far, the question is why that one versus some other one by Samsung or BenQ or one of the other ones that seem to have high ratings. But anyway, I just don't know, and to be honest with you. I can't tell what to make of it all. I'm not opposed to having touch panels at all. They probably need to move there. You might have noticed in their quote, they never really did a comparison with other vendors except for one that was doing a short throw projector, which was not a one-to-one comparison. There are no one-to-one comparisons in what has been provided to us, as far as I can tell. Now, I may be wrong on that, but that's how I see it.
I think given that Lisa's left, we're not likely to get one either. But they definitely did pilot.
Yeah, I remember that too, that they did a pilot.
They did a pilot and they
I was
piloted
just looking for
several
that.
different technologies.
Yeah.
And this is what they landed on. I think we funded 4 or 6 different rooms, if I'm not mistaken, so that they could pilot a couple of different technologies, and they did that. Any other thoughts, Susan, Francine?
I found the request for the tech pilot program in fiscal year 2022,
Yes.
looking to see what it says on here.
I don't think we gave them as much as they asked for.
Yeah. The detail about what they were piloting, I'm not seeing, but I'm just seeing the request. But I do remember that they were looking at a bunch of technologies and they narrowed it down to a couple of panels and selected this one.
Here's a thought. Here's a thought. We, at this point, and I could share my screen again. On our trials, we have the iPads are now in the approved or recommended column and still TBD on the smart panels. Going down, we have a 90,000 left. So we could plug in 90,000 on this line and say, what can you do with $90,000?
That's an option. It's one of three options that we're going to need to consider in terms of balancing this.
Mm-hmm.
Would be my instinct.
And did Ron, I don't think he thought that there was any way to phase in the IT upgrades for the 433 that he's asking for. Is that right? That it was, I mean, just to break that dollar amount down, I don't think that was, I don't think he was able to do that, right? It's, we have to do it, and that's the price, basically, is the message I walked away with.
Mhm.
That was the message I walked away with as well. And just, speaking out of school from a technology perspective, and Ralph chime in here, but I don't think you could really phase this. You can't do one data center this year and the other data center next year because they back up to each other. They replicate to each other. So I don't think you can slice it geographically. I also don't think you can slice it like sort of horizontally and just replace the servers this year and the storage next, the compute servers this year and the storage next year, because it just really wouldn't, I don't think that would work. So I do think it's a, it's a one and done.
There is something that caught my eye in his spreadsheet, and I can share that with you if you like.
Please, because I think we need to.
Yeah.
Before we go there, just to be clear, so I mentioned there are probably three levers we could pull. Okay, one of them obviously is to reduce the number of smart panels to make this fit. Do a half rollout at the Deer Hill School. The next is IT, the data centers. Okay, and then the third option is to dip into the stabilization fund, just so that everybody knows what the three options are that are kicking around in my head. But let's go on to the data centers and the spreadsheet there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brian, before we jump onto that, I just wanted to remind everybody, but the ViewSonic rollout is a 4-year plan
Yes.
totaling almost 700,000.
Yes.
So we've pushed it
Yes,
out.
this is-
Push it into the next year too.
Right. So this wave is the entirety of the middle school, and then there's the high school and Osgood and Deer Hill still.
I think all the more reason to ask them to go back and get the lowest possible pricing, and maybe the model they chose for the highest possible price maybe more than we can afford. And if there is a lower price model that will work for them and may not have all the features, as long as those features aren't a showstopper for education, then they should come in with a lower recommendation rather than the absolute highest recommendation. When we're talking about so many classrooms across 4 schools. So I think there's enough concern to push back.
I think I would disagree. I tend to want to side with the schools and what they're asking for, that they know what is best for the curriculum they're trying to roll out. I'm still struggling with the IT number
Mm-hmm.
between last year and this year. I think we will have approved, if the 433 gets approved, which it sounds like we have no choice, just under $1 million will go to IT.
Right.
We're not done with the refresh yet, just to be clear.
What's that?
And that will not complete the refresh, just to be clear.
And that's my fear, is that it's another $400 some odd thousand next year. When his 10-year plan shows a couple $100,000, as it did last year for this year, and it's nearly twice as much. So I'm concerned about, and I understand everything's, prices have been increasing across the board, and I'm sure IT is no different. But just a handle on what has to get done next year, and will be subject to new prices, whatever that might be, when he starts looking at new prices. But I am concerned about the amount of dollars going towards IT, and we have to sacrifice other things.
So that meets my definition of pushing back as well on IT, because there are still some real concerns. Our concerns have not been addressed completely. I do want to point out that there is a project contingency, and Michelle, maybe you can help us with this, of 7%, $37,000. Now, based on Ron's discussions with us, in my mind, there should really be no contingency. In my mind, he has spec'd very carefully the equipment that the town needs and the pricing on it. So is a project contingency of 7% necessary? Or can that be eliminated or reduced? However.
So-
Is it?
Go
Sorry,
ahead,
go on.
Ryan. No, go ahead.
Your comments can be more important when you hear mine. Please go ahead.
I don't really have one, so it's definitely not
Okay.
more important. What I was just going to say is, I know that Ron has really dug deep into this, and that 7% is something he had come up with. Without him here, I'm hesitant to say what can be reduced or what can't be.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's certainly a question I can ask.
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
that goes under the list of things that we are concerned about and would like to get clarification on.
Yeah, so I've been stressing my brain on this all day today as well. And my curiosity finally got the best of me, and I went back and to see if my memory was serving correctly, because I recall that we did basically the entire network rollout, back in whatever it was, 2016, including the fiber net and including 200 grand worth of fiber all around town and all the devices for the schools and everything else, for numbers that were smaller than what we're seeing now, just for pieces of the refresh. And just to put this in perspective, in the what is this? I think this is the 2016 warrant. The number for IT infrastructure, including servers, routers, switches, access points, et cetera, okay, was $444,000. I just rounded to an even, okay? So that excludes the townwide fiber installation, which was $206,000. It excludes, the digital learning, which is just fancy speak for the, for the laptops and iPads. It excluded a bunch of computer replacements, but this really was the entire, all of the brains in the network. It included all the switches, all of the routers, all of the security firewalls, all of the wireless access points, all the switches, in the closets throughout the buildings. It was all for $443,000. So, last year we just did the WAN, the wide area network, connecting the buildings, and the security for whatever it was, $500,000. And now we're doing the data centers for $430,000, and we still, we still are going to see a replacement of the wireless access points, and we still have yet to see a replacement of the the distribution switches throughout the buildings. And there's probably stuff I'm missing. So, all said and done, this refresh is going to come in at probably 3 times what we spent for the original deployment 6-7 years ago. And I just, the cost of this equipment has not done that. So I just instinctively, I'm struggling with this. I struggled with the number last year and ultimately didn't get a resolution on exactly why we were buying what we were buying, but that's done. This year I'm struggling with the exact same issue. So it's gnawing at me that I feel the need to do some more work to understand it. It may be right where we land in the end, but if you go back to the spreadsheet, Michael, if I could ask you to pull that back up. You caught one thing that caught my eye as well, but I want to go through this so people understand it. And then I need to go through it with Ron. And I'm going to, I think we're going to need to go through it as a committee with Ron. I don't want to just toss him onto a hot seat, although there was a possibility he was going to join tonight. That may or may not happen. No, not this spreadsheet, the spreadsheet for Ron's data center purchases. I just want to go through this so that people understand what's on here and what's giving me angst. Now, I don't know if you can stretch it so you can catch all the columns, Michael, but is there a way to, widen the screen or it's there? Perfect. Okay. So the number up on line in 4D, I'm not sure what that is. It doesn't seem to tie into anything down below. Okay. But as I work down, okay, the D column is the total of the EFG column, right? So the 46,000 in line 13 for the for a pair of PowerEdge R650s is 46 grand, right? Of which 33 is the hardware, and 6,500 is is the installation. Then 5.9 is 5 years of support. Okay. In column G. So just bear with me for a second. You'll see where I'm going with this. Now the power store. So those are the compute servers. Okay. And I think the first question I'm going to have for Ron is, is there 2 of them because we actually need the processing power of 2 servers in each of the data centers, or are they redundant? In other words, are you really just carrying the load on one and the other one is there as a failover? Because if in fact one of the servers is there as a failover, we already have a failover in the other data center. So you don't need redundancy on top of redundancy. It actually doesn't add, it really doesn't add anything more other than complexity and cost. I'm going to pause there for a second and ask if everyone understands what I just said or has any questions on it.
I understand, but I don't think I agree.
Okay.
I don't think it's fair to Ron to just, say you're doing redundancy on redundancy. My feeling on Ron is that he has really good reasons for
Well, I'm going to ask.
what he does.
I'm not criticizing it. I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask if this.
And you should.
This is what I need to understand. Do we actually need 2 servers with the processing power for the load of one data center, or is it really just one plus we've got a redundant server in each of the 2 data centers? Okay. I guess the analogy I'd make is if I was riding a unicycle, I wouldn't carry 3 spare tires. I'd carry 1. The second thing that's got me focused is line 16. You know, the power store device is 70,000 for 28 terabytes of uncompressed storage. That's $2,500 a terabyte. It's just a really big number. And I want to look at that device a little more carefully. My question about it specifically, you know, is whether we're buying a high-end device with a small amount of storage disk capacity slotted into it. And as a result, ending up with a bigger price than perhaps if we bought a mid-range device that was, you know, or even a low-end device that was in fact optimized for sort of 25 to 50 terabytes, which is where our need is. This thing goes up to petabytes, which, you know, we're not a petabyte customer. So it's just a question of whether or not we're buying perhaps something that it was designed for a much different customer than we are. So that's question number 2. On line 19, the storage, the SAN switches have been removed, which is great. It's out of the cost, but I'm a little perplexed as to why they were ever in there in the first place. I mean, whoever spec'd this out, you know, one would presume would know whether or not you actually needed a SAN switch. It's not a question I can answer, but apparently the answer is no. And yet it was in the original build, which just sort of sends my radar up on everything else. On line 20, in column F, you can see the installation cost is 15 grand. But in line D, it totals 30,000. So it's getting doubled for some reason. And I'm not sure what that is. I mean, turnkey implementation with Hyper-V, 15 hours, right? We're already paying for the installation on each of the devices in column F, right? So this is something else. In addition to the installation, I mean, it might be configuration of some sort. But I'm not really sure why it's, you know, doubling from 15 to 30 and why there would be $30,000 worth of configuration on this above and beyond the installation. Maybe it's 15 for the server and 15 for the storage. I don't know. It just seems, I don't understand it, I guess is what I would say. And then all of those, you know, items repeat, right, under the, so that's for the middle high school, and then the whole thing just repeats for the CEA. So those would be my questions down to that point. Now, if you scroll down to the software, yeah, right there. So you've got the Microsoft Data Center licensing. So we bought the servers, right? You still need to buy the Microsoft software. So that's 35 grand for an unlimited server license. But then the deployment, I don't understand this number at all. It's $47,000 worth of deployment. We've already paid for installation of the, you know, of the servers and the storage up above. We've already paid for implementation up above. I don't understand what this $46,000 deployment number is. I can't imagine it's 46 grand to load Microsoft software onto 4 servers. Especially, you know, I mean, these are just standard commodity Dell servers. It just seems, I don't get it. So I'm very concerned more than anything about the service numbers that are, you know, adding up here, you know, in a fairly massive way. I mean, you got $47,000 here plus another, you know, 60,000 up above, so it's, 106,000 plus all the installation numbers. You're looking at like 100, whatever, $25,000, $150,000 worth of services to bolt in place and configure 6 pizza boxes. That's complicated, but it just seems like a massive number. And that's before we get to the contingency, which I agree with you, Michael. I'm not sure we have the money to be throwing contingencies of projects. I don't really feel like we're doing that anywhere else.
Do we have the ability to say, listen, we can give you 300,000 or 325,000, but you've got to make that work with what you've got to do?
That's an approach. I'm hesitant to do something arbitrary like that. But I guess I'd rather have this conversation with Ron and see if we can pull some of this stuff out. I don't understand what it is.
Fair.
The numbers are really big.
So Brian, I actually just heard from Chris, and Ron had a family emergency to deal with, so he's not going to be on tonight.
Okay. So, Francine, I hate to arbitrarily pick a price and tell them this is what you can spend.
I appreciate that, certainly. But I sense that going back and asking for explanations for the items you've pointed out, there's going to be some rationale why he says we need it. I don't think, I guess I'm not convinced that he's going to come off the 433. But I'm probably being cynical, or I am being cynical, but.
I don't disagree. I think we, I guess having been through this last year and ultimately approving something that I wasn't comfortable with, I'm a lot less comfortable just repeating this year after year.
Yeah.
The way the argument goes is we point out to Ron that the previous purchase was far less than this, and that subsequent years were shown in the 5-year plan as being at $200,000 each. And so that has raised our questions. And we have some specific questions that go to our concern that things aren't lining up, that there's some discrepancies between what we spent in the past and what we're being asked to spend on now. And so that's causing us to look very closely at what his requests entail. And I think we should be getting at our answers before we make any move on this. So that's how I would approach it, is just to say, we're seeing a difference in the initial spend. We're seeing a difference in your projected spends. We need to get better justification in place. And justification that, meets, our cynicism. That's our role, is to be skeptical and to ask hard questions, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, it's to vet it. It's to really it's to ask the tough questions around a big number, and this is a big number. I think, in fairness to Ron, to some degree, a lot of the technical work to spec this stuff, is something that he relies on, his technology partners for. The unfortunate reality is those guys are all paid on commission.
Yeah.
So it's hard for him to go to them and say, well, design me the lowest cost solution that I need. It's not natural for them to present it, and I just it does require some stress testing. Okay, look, delivery of the message is going to be important. I'm happy to do my best with it, Michael. If you want to have the conversation with Ron, that's okay too.
Well, the two of us can.
We can do that too.
Yeah,
we can do that too. And then I think I think to diffuse the situation and possibly to gather as much information as possible to advance it, as soon as we can get a hold of Ron and then get him working on the questions and then have him come back in front of the committee maybe as early as next Monday, because I think the select board meets next Tuesday and they'd like to vote to close the warrant. So
Okay,
in a perfect world, we'd get this resolved.
okay.
Let me throw in a couple of thoughts, if I may, on this. There's one given I know is probably true, and that is that he probably does have to replace the servers and the storage. I think that's a fact.
I agree.
So I start from that point.
Yeah, let's pause there for a second. Is there anyone here that thinks otherwise?
No.
Okay. So I think everyone understands that this stuff is end of life. The Microsoft load is end of life. The devices are end of life. We need to replace it all. So okay. So we're in agreement on that. Sorry, Rob.
To be a little clearer, I think that the server operating system software is probably not end of life. But in other words, Microsoft has a commitment to support that kind of operating system for about 10 years. But no, that aside, okay.
No, Ron specifically said that the operating system, the 2012 that they're running on now, has to be replaced.
If it's 10 years, that's correct. That's about where it is. Okay, about 10
Yeah.
years is all you should get out of it. After that, support drops off. So that's how
The support ends, is what he's telling us. Is that
Yeah,
that-
so that's where
the support is going to end on the
that may or may
2012
not be-
software.
That may or may not be true. We heard that about operating system, 7 operating system and other things, and they're never turned to be exactly true. But I'm not debating the point. Okay, I'm only saying
Okay.
it is approximately the end of life, but not exactly the end of life on that operating system. But anyway, that aside, I think we do have to replace both the servers and the storage. The other major thing has always been in my mind that if I were choosing, and I've said this perhaps in the past, if I were choosing a computer these days, I would take a look at my utilization of my current system. And I would say exactly how much additional processing power do I need? Because there is a whole list of both Intel and AMD processors that you can choose from, and you choose one that meets your needs. So you have to make a choice based on what, in fact, your actual needs are based on your current utilization. And unless you do that, you're going to make a mistake and buy the most expensive thing you can get because you really don't know your utilization. That also applies to storage. It also applies to RAM. So in the absence of any of that, I've not seen any of that. I don't know what to make of what he's buying and whether or not the capacity and the utilization would be so small for this for the installation he actually wants to put in, that in fact we probably are overpaying for something far in excess of our needs. But unless you know current utilization and what he expects to get in future, you can't make the judgment. But I hope you could ask the question about it, and that's my view of it. We all make that judgment, but I don't know we've heard how he has made that judgment.
So how would you phrase that as a question for Ron?
I would say utilization, okay? Current utilization, current processor speeds, current SAM speed, everything else we know is extraordinarily fast. And how much faster and how much more capacity are you actually adding?
Okay, I'm asking, what is the current utilization, including CPU, and how much more capacity is being purchased and for what reason?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, Brian, your questions go to the number of boxes and if they are,
Not so much the number of boxes, as just the raw capacity, particularly on the storage. And just to get back to the numbers, I'm more focused on the cost of the storage being a driver here. Just if you look, at line 13E versus 16E, right? So two servers totals 34 grand. They're, they're 17 each. But the one storage device is 70 grand. And I'm just a little concerned that we're buying, if you look at his description here, it says 28/61 terabyte SAN at a 2.5 to 1 ratio. What that means is he's buying 28 terabytes of actual physical capacity, SSD capacity on the drives. But they're calculating that out to provide 61 effective terabytes of SAN capacity with a 2.5 to 1 compression ratio.
Yep.
Okay. 28 terabytes of storage is like, it's chump change compared to 70 grand. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, you can get I was just Googling this, you can get a 12 terabyte SSD for $1,000. If you, Googled, a 28 terabyte storage array, it would be a couple thousand. Now that's just a raw digital vault, right? It doesn't have, replication and deduplication and a handful of software features, but this is, it's not wildly complicated stuff. My fear is that they've gone with effectively a closed proprietary storage system that, larger enterprises generally rely on, I guess is what I'd say.
So you're saying that 12 terabytes of storage costs 2,000?
Not SAN, I'm just saying the raw drives. Okay. You can, I mean, if you just Google it when we get off the call, I mean, you'll be shocked at the cost of, a 40 terabyte just storage array full of disks or spinning disks or full of SSDs, which are, probably twice as much. The storage itself is not expensive. And that's why I'm wrestling with this number. There's a bundling of software functionality to turn this into a SAN that's driving this price through the roof. And it's just something about it doesn't sit quite logically with me. And I think the answer, when I mentioned this earlier, is you pull up the the PowerStore device, and it's designed to scale out to petabytes of storage. It's not designed to do 28 terabytes of storage. That's like the minimum configuration that you can even set it up to do. It's not optimized for that. It's not designed for that. It feels like it's a high, it feels like it's designed for a much larger enterprise client than us. And I feel like that may be what's skewing the price.
Okay. And I also have line 20, labor for turnkey Hyper-V, totals 30K. Is it 15K for the 15 hours? Or how do we get to 30K?
Yeah, there seems to be a doubling. I mean, yeah. Is it 15 or is it 30?
Yeah, and then my
Shows up
question
twice.
is should contingency be reduced?
Yeah. I mean, look, if there's a redundancy in line 20, right? It's supposed to be 15 on line 20 and another 15 on line 30. We just saved 30,000. That plus the contingency and the whole thing fits and the budget's resolved, right? And he still gets the same hardware that he's looking for. Yeah. This could be a really simple conversation.
Right. So are we going to ask Michelle to set up a meeting for the three of us, or Michelle, four of us tomorrow or the next day?
Sure, I can reach out to Ron.
Right.
Yeah, I'm totally flexible. I think we need to do this ASAP.
Right. And then we bring it back next Monday to the full committee?
Provided the full committee is available next Monday, yes.
Yeah, right. Agreed there. Okay. All right, so I've at least made note of our questions. Mike Barkley, you just popped up on my screen. What do you got?
Well, I just got the latest draft warrant, so I just thought I'd kind of just let you know what I'm seeing in that for the general fund. And what has been taken out versus last week are the three items that you discussed earlier: the retail classrooms, facility department vehicles, and the facility assessment. Now, based on the numbers that they have in there and what I'm looking at on the budget overview, there's still like an $83,000 hole, deficit in the capital budget based on what they have in there right now.
Mhm.
And they have 432,000 for the IT, not the 433. I just thought I'd let y'all know that.
Thank you, Mike.
So it might make sense, Mike, to just take a minute and tick down the list and see what's in that. Because I'm not sure why we're ending up with an $80,000 hole. I had it closer to 60, but.
So I'll take you through it. So there are now 12 items in the general fund.
Can you screen share that?
I actually just have a hard copy of it. I'm sorry.
No worries. That's okay.
But it's the 90. I mean, you can go through your spreadsheet, Mike.
Okay.
Why don't you walk us through what's on the warrant, Mike Barkley?
Sure.
Please.
So the project number one is the schools, the 8 diesel school buses for 90,000.
Yep.
Then project 2 is replace Chromebooks for 52,000.
Yep.
Then Deer Hill School furniture for 35,000.
Yep.
Replace the iPads for the 93,960.
Mm-hmm.
They still have the smart panels in there at 155,161.
Right.
Roads and sidewalks for 300,000.
Yep.
The John Deere loader for 145.
Okay.
Repair sewer lines for 15,000.
Yep.
The data center for 432,000.
Okay.
Police cars for 124. Tasers for 12,355.
Okay.
And then the turnout gear for 33,500.
You did not mention. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, now, the one thing you mentioned 63, Brian, and why I'm coming up with 83 is because I'm looking at the debt service that they have in the operating budget, capital stabilization. And instead of the 571,487 that I heard last week, they've got it $20,000 higher at 591,487. So it looks, based on my quick math, the 12 items they have, or 12 projects, are totaling $1,487,976. And then they've got the debt service at 591,487, which I believe, if you add those two together, is 83,403 above the 1,996,060 they have allocated for capital stabilization. I left my 12C at work, so I'm working off a normal calculator. So I could not.
No, that's okay.
But I did double check that. I think those are the right numbers.
Just one more reason not to add on debt. Every time you think you solve a problem, it rears its ugly head. Okay, so we've got an $83,000 gap to fill, not a $63,000 gap to fill. I guess all the more reason to understand both of these issues. Outstanding.
And this is the warrant as of today's date?
As of today, yeah, as of a couple hours ago.
Okay. So two questions I'd have for people. Number one, is there any other item on the list right now where we have, we have included it, but people think that it should be considered, possibly, to be cut, other than the ViewSonics and the data center, which I think are two primary focus areas to fill this gap.
So Brian, sorry, Mike, I know it's short money, but the $15,000 for the sewer probably can be absorbed in DPW's operating budget or facilities or somebody's budget. That's $15,000. I think you can free up that funding.
It's still in the warrant, but I'm going to take it off of our side.
Take it off, Mike. I just for now, let just make a mental note that that's a possibility, but that doesn't really, I mean, I guess scrapping for the last 15, we could go there as opposed to the fund.
All right, and I need to put 591, 487 into our side for the debt service.
For debt service.
Right, why is it this not? I wonder if I typed.
So it's 591 for, so it's literally just instead of a 7, it's a 9. So it's just a typo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I may have made some kind of spreadsheet error here, because I'm taking this 83,463 and I'm plugging it in. Oh, that's short. That's what it's short on that side. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're short 83.
Okay, so 83, 84. Call it 85,000. I'm gonna just plug this 85,123. What I'm doing here is allocating what would be our surplus, because I had 0 for the interactive smart panels. And if we place 85,032 and make the adjustment on the debt service, then we come out at 0. With
it's certainly one of the levers
yeah,
that we could pull. We could cut that to anything that we need to make it balanced.
right. And I also have the number on Ron's spreadsheet of 433,666 on our side.
Okay.
I think you raised a really good point with the smart boards about the question around hardware versus software, because I know in the data center world, for instance, when you're looking at routers and switches, there's a company called Arista that does low-end white boxes that has been taking share in the Azure and AWS data centers. And the reason they have is because their hardware is cheaper than Cisco's or Juniper's. And, it's all about the software that's being pushed through, not, the hardware is all kind of a push these days. So that question you asked, regarding the smart boards, I think is a good one.
It basically applies to the smart boards and the storage. It's the exact same issue. Okay, so we know the levers in front of us, right? There were basically two items outstanding that we need to do a little more research on. What one we potentially can see cuts in terms of these service numbers, if or contingency. The other, we could potentially see cuts, most likely by cutting the number of rooms and just doing this in 2 phases as opposed to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really the 2 levers there. Or third alternative is we can dip into the stabilization fund. Don't mistake me for advocating this. I think we're obligated to discuss it. So the the current balance of the fund is roughly $800,000 on the nose. And it's, you know, it's below the $1 million target for really two reasons. Number one is that we, in the past, have appropriated the full cost of certain projects where we're expected to get, we're hoping to get grants that would defray large chunks of those projects. And one of those grants has been denied. So the generator grant for the fire and police station, did not come through. And so we're going to be out that full appropriation. We're not going to be getting money back on a grant. The CEA van is actually contingent on receipt of the grant. We should get an answer on that shortly. So they have our full appropriation, but they're not supposed to go buy the van until they actually receive the grant. So hopefully we get good news on that, and that should put about $50,000 back into the fund. And then the last item was the WAN upgrades last year. They qualify for E-rate funding, which is a refund. I think it's about 15 or 20% of the value of the project. My recollection was it was about $100,000 that would come back to us. So that gets us up closer to our $1 million number.
Just by 50,000?
Sorry?
The only number I heard you say was 50,000 that we should put on the plus side.
So 50,000 for the van,
Yeah,
the CEA van, plus roughly another $100,000 of E-rate refunds.
right.
For the
Gotcha.
WAN. Sorry, I said WAN, van, it all sounds the same. For the wide area network and security upgrades that we did last year, that should get us back up much closer to $1 million. We've also suffered some losses on the portfolio. I've yet to get exact numbers on that. But I would have expected our balance to be, just based on my tracking math, to be closer to 900, which means we've probably lost somewhere around $100,000 on the portfolio, which is a big number if you're not tracking the bond markets. I guess Mike, you're in that world. Maybe that number is less stunning to you, but does that surprise you? Not surprise you?
What surprises me is that our stabilization fund is in a risk tolerant vehicle.
Yeah.
I would expect that our stabilization funds should be in money markets and not in bonds.
I mean, you could have definitely lost that in bonds last year.
Yeah.
You could have lost it. You could have lost it in treasuries. So yeah.
And I think that's exactly what happened. So a 10% loss on a treasury portfolio that's not a shocker, Mike Barkley.
Depends on what maturities they had. I mean, if they had longer dated maturities in there where the duration was going to get hit because of the rising rates last year, it's probably possible. I mean, even though the short end of the curve actually is what went up the most, though. So it could have been in 2 years, and just given the movement there, I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of possibility. Okay.
So we'll get more information on that, but the balance is what the balance is in terms of the current market value of the securities.
Okay.
It's at right around 800. And yeah, Michael Dick, I think there is going to be a conversation around this in the near future. Should we be in money markets or not? I mean, if you're in money markets, at least over the past few years, you're basically getting zero yield, zero.
Yes, but you have liquidity.
You have liquidity in treasuries, but you also have the ability to take market losses, and that's what we've seen. So
agreed. Okay.
Yeah, but look, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised when they actually get our fiscal 23 results and see how hard the stabilization funds have been hit, because I mean, half the room hasn't even been alive during a rising interest rate environment, right? So these losses are, and the other half who have been, may not have been in the markets. So these numbers are going to surprise a lot of people.
Mhm.
In terms of what happens to bond values when interest rates rise. I mean, bond values fall, even high quality treasuries. So that's where we are. Sort of a long-winded backdrop to the sort of the question of whether or not we just reach into the stabilization fund for this, whatever it is, $83,000 gap. It's my instinct to push hard on the request before considering that, I guess is what I would say, but I'm really interested in hearing others' opinions on this. Susan, you're upper left corner, so.
Yeah, no, my opinion on it is, why should our ability to dip into that change our feeling about not feeling like we are fully understanding what it is we're buying for IT. So I would prefer to understand what we're buying, and then if we're convinced it's the right thing, then that's the conversation we have next.
Right.
Agreed.
I agree.
Thoughts?
I would agree with what Susan just mentioned.
Okay.
Me too.
How about you, Ralph? Sam?
Yes, I certainly
Okay.
agree.
All right, so let's sharpen our pencils, have the conversations, and see if we can, get these requests to all fit in the budget. And in the interest of making some progress on the items that at least are resolved, I guess the question is, would the committee like to go ahead and vote all the other items that are not really subject to change in terms of dollar amounts? I mean, there's not really much we can do with the other requests, with the exception of maybe the sewer line that Michelle suggested. I mean, we could possibly hold that one back and vote all the others. But I'd be inclined to vote the slate and then just, update the advisory committee that, we still have 3 requests that we need to fit into the remaining funds, and that, right now there's still 83 over.
Mm-hmm.
And that, we'll hope to get it resolved by Monday of next week. And that, I think that's pretty much where I am. But how do people feel about voting the rest of the items?
Yes, I'd say yes, sure.
I agree. Be nice to feel like we're making some progress.
Okay,
Right.
Susan?
Yeah.
I agree too.
Okay,
I agree.
Mike?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess what I'd suggest, is if Mike Barkley could read the list as it appears on the warrant. Okay, because that's what's in the warrant and it ties to our list, and that way our motion will reflect the warrant line for line, with the exception of the 3 items that we're not voting, if that makes sense. And then I'm just thinking about how we do this, and then someone would make a motion that we vote to approve that list of items. And then it would be 1 vote. Is that the right way to do this?
Certainly the most efficient, yeah.
Okay, before we go down the path and find out that it's fraught with peril, let me ask you a question. With the exception of the 3 items that we're holding back from this vote, does anyone, without going into detail, does anyone anticipate voting, other than anything other than I on the rest of the list? In other
Why don't
words,
you specify the 3 items that are off?
yeah,
Not
the
on
3
the
items
list.
we're going to hold back are going to for tonight are going to be the data center,
Mm-hmm.
the 28 interactive smart panels,
Yep.
and the sewer line.
Ah,
Okay.
okay.
So
That
we're
was
going
the
to
one I
hold back those 3 items.
Mm-hmm.
So the other items on the list, the question is, does anyone anticipate either abstaining or voting nay on any of them? Because if that's the case, we would have to probably want to move these individually, perhaps, as opposed to as a group.
I don't plan on abstaining on any of the other items,
You do not plan on abstaining,
other
Okay.
than the three that we have already excluded, no.
right? All right, so either abstain or vote nay. Does anyone anticipate abstaining or voting nay on any of those lines?
I don't.
Do not, mm-mm.
Okay, I don't either. Okay, so with that said, well, look, if we get into it, and someone changes their mind, that's fine. But with that said, if Mike Barkley, you could read the list on the warrant with the exception of the three that we just flagged. Okay, that'll be the list, and then someone will just make the motion to move that list.
Yeah, so it would be, okay, so.
Go
for-
slowly, please.
I will, yeah, no, I will, definitely. So Article 8, capital improvement budget as detailed in the draft warrant dated March 29th, 2023. Projects number 1, 8 diesel school buses for $90,000. Project 2, replace Chromebooks, $52,000. Project 3, Deer Hill School Furniture Grade 3, $35,000. Project 4, replace all iPads, Deer Hill School, including chargers and cases. And Joseph Osgood as well for $93,960. So those are projects 1 through 4. And then project number 6 is roads and sidewalks for $300,000. Project 7 is the John Deere 410L loader backhoe for $145,000. And then project number 9, oh no, we're skipping 9, sorry about that. Project 10.
All right, did you skip 8 as well?
Yeah, so we're skipping 5, 8, and 9.
Gotcha.
And the next one to vote on would be project 10, 2 police cars for $124,000. Project 11, tasers of 24 of them on a 5-year lease for $12,355. And then project number 12, turnout, 3 sets of turnout gear for $33,500. So I guess somebody has to comprise a motion based on what I've just said. And if you want me to repeat anything, just let me know. There are 12 items. Items 5, 8, and 9 are excluded.
Is there a total on that list, Mike, that we could deduct from?
So the total would be, give me 1 second. So the total for items 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12 are $885,815. Let me just double check that.
I got the same number.
Okay.
Bingo.
And I do have my 12C.
Good for you.
I move that Capital Budget Committee recommend the purchase, recommend the expenditure of $885,815 for projects 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12. That projects 5, 8, and 9 are still under discussion.
I second that motion.
All right. Do we have any further discussion? Well, no further discussion. We'll do a roll call vote. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, aye.
Mike Dick,
Mike Dick, aye.
Francine,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Brian Host, aye. And technically, I think, Ralph, you're not supposed to vote, but you're welcome to give up a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a smile or a frown.
Okay, 2 thumbs
Two
up.
thumbs up and a smile. Okay.
Okay, that's 4 eyes and a smile.
Right, good deal. Good work.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Okay. All right. So it sounds like we just need to dig into these panels in this data center and talk to Ron and
Yep.
and hopefully see if we can make this work.
Right.
All right. Do we have any other items of business for this evening or any other
Just
topic?
next meeting.
Next meeting. Good question. We are presuming that, all this presumes that we can meet again and vote these other 3 items on Monday. I haven't even looked at my calendar yet. Guess technically we could also do Tuesday before the select board.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking out loud. Michelle, I don't know if you have a thought on that.
It's entirely up to you.
Yeah. I think the sooner the better, but how do people look Monday night?
Fine.
Good.
I'm okay.
Susan?
Yep, I'm fine.
Okay, good. I said, looked like Ralph was okay. And people prefer 5 o'clock versus 7?
Mhm.
Okay.
Sure.
So we have an agreement. Next meeting will be Monday at 5 o'clock.
Okay, great.
And hopefully we will vote these 3 remaining items and make sure to put business to this.
Right. And then Michelle, I'll just wait for a meeting invite from you to meet with Ron tomorrow or Friday
Yeah.
with you and Brian.
Yeah, the sooner the better. I'd love to get into that discussion tomorrow.
Right.
Okay.
On the smart board spend.
Yeah.
Do we need anybody from the school side, be it the administration or committee, to engage with us on this last question? I sort of think they should. And if the IT director is gone, who is stepping in to fill that role? To make choices on the choices that were already made by the previous director.
Yeah. I guess I'd probably reach out to Lance Dial and to Pat Sullivan and just see if there's anyone else up there that really was involved in these panels that can speak to it.
Right, and can help us reduce the cost, sharpen up the pencil.
Yeah. And I'm also going to look at, and I'm sure, Ralph, you're probably going to, if curiosity gets the best of you, you will too. I may actually spend some time looking at these panels and some of the alternatives, just so that we're
Good.
informed.
Yep.
All right. Well, if there's no further points of discussion, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Anyone? You guys want to hang out?
Second.
Motion.
Sorry, did someone make a motion?
Ralph did.
Ralph made the motion and Susan seconded. Okay. Roll call vote. Susan Franklin?
Susan Franklin, aye.
All right. Brian Host, aye. Michael Dick?
Mike Dick, aye.
Ralph,
Ralph Dormitzer, aye.
Francine.
Francine Lyons, aye.
Okay, it is unanimous. Time 6:44. Thanks for your time and your good work, folks. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Mike, Michelle.